I believe everyone is a starseed. Every single one of us comes from the stars. Every one of us is light and energy. But in this reality, because it's so dense, and there are so many people essentially who have forgotten who they are and don't even believe that, believing even that this is their only life, for example. There are souls that are coming into this lower density environment that are evolved or have gone through an ascension process or are ascended to some degree that have come in to decide that are here to help. So they're the lions or the way showers or the black sheep. There's lots of different ways you can look at them because they all have unique qualities, but they're the ones in the population that are different, that are here, the way showers, the innovators. They're here to like move us forward and remind us who we are. So they don't like authority. They always are coming up with new ideas. They don't conform to programming. They don't do well in school. And a lot of the clients and children I work with are those exact souls. So starseeds are really just advanced souls that are coming in to help the ones that forgot who they are.
Broaderlands Podcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlands Podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands Podcast.
Sherri, welcome to Broaderlands Podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor for me to be on.
Yeah, this is the #1 podcast in Japan right now.
Really?
No, I'm just messing around.
I was like, that's random, but okay. I'll go with it.
Sounds good, right? No, I'm grateful to have you on. I'm grateful Gail connected us. And I got your book, The Great Awakening, Starseeds and the Great Awakening. And I know you have 15 books, 5 for adults and 10 for children, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, by the time I got to the 3rd page, I started crying. And I appreciate it. I'm just more sensitive ever since my awakening. I used to always push stuff in and put up that persona, that tough guy image, and very violent person at one time. But now it's like I'm very life sensitive and less ego sensitive, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I went through my dark night and my awakening, and I changed and evolved as a person as well. And I'm not the same person I used to be.
Yeah, thank you. For those who are not familiar with the term starseed, which is part of the title of your book, how does that relate or differ from the idea of a soul? Can you define what a starseed is and the difference between a starseed and a soul?
Yeah. So in my interpretation of it, because nothing in my opinion is absolute. So it's all in the perception of the person, right? But how I perceive it and how I've learned it to be is, so a soul is a fractal of light, of source, of creation, of, it's all energy. We're all fractals of energy. We're all light. And when we fractal off, we become individualized. And that's what separates us, the perception of separation. But in reality, we're all still connected, no matter what, no matter where we incarnate, no matter what we do. So the term starseed, I think, is a continuation of the aspect of being a soul. But the reason it's coming up a lot here is that I believe that the reality that we find ourselves in right now, in this lower dimensional Earth, this planet has descended over many thousands upon thousands of years. And through that descension process, and there's lots of reason for it, the humans, the souls that are incarnating, who have chosen to incarnate here on this planet, are in a lower density reality, and therefore they have forgotten who they are, their potentials, the capacity of which they have to do just about anything and tap into much greater than what they know, what they perceive through programming, manipulation, generational trauma, ancestral programming, all sorts of things. So this term starseed really is coming into where we are right now as a collective. We are ascending. The human race is evolving and expanding and activating and breaking through the programming and seeing beyond the illusion and the fear-based reality and control that has become the paradigm here through the powers that have controlled it throughout the dark ages that we've kind of gone through, and manipulated the souls into thinking that they are basically enslaved. So when we look at the term starseed, I believe everyone is a starseed. Every single one of us comes from the stars. Every one of us is light and energy. But in this reality, because it's so dense, people, and there are so many people essentially who have forgotten who they are and don't even believe that, believing even that this is their only life, for example. There are souls that are coming into this lower density environment that are evolved or have gone through an ascension process or are ascended to some degree that have come in to decide that are here to help. So they're the lions or the way showers or the black sheep. There's lots of different ways you can look at them because they all have unique qualities, but they're the ones in the population that are different, that are here, the way showers, the innovators. They're here to like move us forward and remind us who we are. So they don't like authority. They always are coming up with new ideas. They don't conform to programming. They don't do well in school. And a lot of the clients and children I work with are those exact souls. So starseeds are really just advanced souls that are coming in to help the ones that forgot who they are.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Who do you call the dark players? I know you mentioned that in your book.
Yes.
Throughout your book, who do you think they are? Like these dark forces?
So the dark forces, the thing about it is the reason I come up with a blanket term for it is because I don't think anybody truly knows the depths of which the hierarchy goes. So the lower hierarchy would be the human forms of the politicians, you know, the less than 1%, the ones that control the money. I don't like to use names for obvious reasons, so everyone knows who I'm talking about. And then we have the groups like the Illuminati, the Cabal. Again, these are all human groups. But outside of that, and I don't know your audience that well and how open they are, but then there are entities, lower astral entities. There are reptilian entities, and there are Dracos, and then there is artificial intelligence, and there are civilizations outside of this planet that are participating in the mechanisms of control to enslave this planet for many reasons. So the dark players really, truly just encompasses everything that we see that's known, but also unknown. And a lot of the hierarchy, you know, the ones that are really in charge aren't even human.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's not something I can't, like, I don't know who they are, but I just have this deep intuition, this deep inner knowing that, you know, like that kind of explains stuff to me through my emotions and my inner standing. But I don't have the evidence, you know, out here, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling that way.
Yeah, thank you. Great awakening. How would you define that?
So the Great Awakening is just encompassing the fact that so many starseeds are coming in. So your audience might relate to Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon is a well-known author who developed quantum hypnosis. It's one form of regression hypnosis where people can go back and see their regress and through hypnosis to see their past lives. So she's written, I don't even know how many books, plus 20 plus books. She's very well known. She's no longer with us, but she started, she started a trend in kind of recalling our origins. And she was the one that talked about the 3 waves of volunteers, which are starseeds. So starseeds have been coming into this planet for, I mean, in my opinion, we've always had starseeds, but to help us get through the dark ages, which we're coming out of, and we're entering a new reality, which is referred to as the ascension. The Great Awakening is just that part, is what that means. It means that we are awakening the masses of people that, like you mentioned yourself. You used to be you were violent. You had a dark side. You didn't probably think about your life outside of in that moment. And many people are stuck in that 3D of fear or manipulation or ego, or they want to be in control, or they're being controlled by someone else. It's that survival mode. So the Great Awakening is about getting out of that survival mode and really aspiring to become what we always had the capacity to be, which is ascended beings ourselves and evolving as a race. So the Great Awakening is us evolving and ascending and becoming sovereign once again, so that we are no longer controlled by these dark players. And the way that occurs is that each one of us do the inner work, and we raise our vibration, and we go within, and we stop listening to the programming, and we stop buying into the 3D interference and the narratives that they are putting forth for us to follow, so that we're basically hypnotized and programmed, and we're breaking that programming, and the illusion is falling, and now people are seeing beyond everything, and now they're standing up for themselves. And that's what the Great Awakening is about. It's not a war. It's not protest. It's not fighting. It's actually activating our intuition and our knowing from a spiritual sense, so that we are awakening our soul, which then awakens these avatars into a density of consciousness that's much higher than we've had the capacity to be in generations before.
I love that. And I love what you said, because before my awakening, I was so identified with the spacesuit, the label, consciousness, all that conditioning, the unresolved trauma, all that stuff affected me and fogged up my window of perception. And I couldn't see. I didn't have a broader lens. It was so self-centered vision, in a
Right.
very small glimpse of reality. And I didn't understand that my personality creates my personal reality, and it was a shitty reality. And I spoke victimese all the time, blaming everyone else. And I was I always felt I was on survival mode. So, yeah, I love that. I was stuck in that for a very long time, and I didn't have that separation behind the thoughts and the emotions. I wasn't that awareness behind it all. I was so identified with these negative, unhealthy beliefs and listening to the inner critic. I was so tightly caught up in it. It's crazy just to see now, to understand that versus before.
Well, and the thing is that what people don't realize is this reality, again, designed by the architects of the dark players. The reality that we're born into here is designed to accommodate that, to amplify our fears, to keep us in the survival mode. Because when we are in survival mode, this reality works for them. It does not. We are not thriving. They thrive. They thrive through our loosh, which is the energy we give off when we are in fear, or we are angry, or we are feeling guilt or shame about something. When we are not whole, we give off this energy that they like. And that's what they feed off of. And it's the power struggle and the system that enslaves us that is beneficial to them. And that's what so our whole reality, if you look at it, is designed to keep us like that. From the moment we're born and we're indoctrinated into the school system, and we're basically being taught the whole time to be, it's like a military. We don't even realize we're being trained like the governmental military, to listen to somebody else, to follow somebody else, to go outside of yourself, to go to church because God isn't within you. You have to go to a pastor or someone else to get the wisdom from some outside of yourself, because you don't have the capacity. And your boss, there's always somebody above you that you have to aspire to be like or to be better. And there's this competition, and the whole reality is based on division and separation and distraction and anything they can do to manipulate us. And on top of that, they amplify it with alcohol and drugs and, and bars and movies. And the whole thing is designed to keep us in a video game like reality. And then we believe it. And then it's passed down generationally, because our parents were programmed that way. And then they raise us to also be that way. And then it just gets passed down. And that's what the Great Awakening is about, is no, we have the capacity to do so much more, and we don't need to go to church, for example, to get the wisdom. We all have it within ourselves. And a lot of this reality is designed to make us second guess our capabilities.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking, man, I'm so grateful for this podcast, because I get to connect with great people like yourself, and just because it could be a lonely road, enlightenment at times, so connected to everything, but you're walking alone, and you got to be willing to do that for at least in my experience, because it's hard to have these conversations in public. A little bit, it's happening a little bit more and more, but it's still rare in where I'm at. Yeah, I'm just grateful to connect with people like you.
Yeah. I think a lot of us feel alone. Starseeds tend to feel alone because you are different than most. and you just, it's hard to connect with people like yourself, and it's hard to go into a group of people or a party or a park or wherever and be able to talk about these things, because everyone is so focused on the 3D stuff, the popular music, the popular movies, how much money are you making, what's your sports team, and what's their stats, and all of the 3D stuff that really is meaningless. It's hard to connect with people that are thinking outside of that. And you're in California. No, you were in California at one point like
Yeah,
me. So we grew up in a dense, heavy city and environment. California is really heavy right now, as is a lot of major cities. So that's a struggle too. The more dense population you live in, the more the darker and more dense the matrix is for you.
Do you think these dark players have something to do with the entity attachments as well? Because they keep us on a lower frequency to attach to us and control us?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're in a quantum field that happens to have physicality. The lower dimension you are, the more physicality there is. The higher dimensional reality you are, the less less need for physicality. So there's light beings, and you can manifest anything you desire in that moment, but it doesn't necessarily have to stay there. So I think in this environment, there are a lot of lower astral entities. That's what attaches to us. And I think they're kind of like the worker bees, or not even necessarily all the worker bees for the dark players, but I think they just loosh off of it. Like they're just, it's like vultures eating the dead carcass of roadkill, right? They're just benefiting from the car running it over. So they're like, I'm just going to, eat all of this meat that just is free for me. And it just happened to be here. So I think a lot of the lower astral entities are just, they don't even have a consciousness. Some of them, it's just energy. And it's just feeding the way that they sustain is through feeding off of other energies. So they like to find themselves around people who are angry, whatever it is that feeds them. They like sadness. They'll be around people that are sad. They like, fear. They'll be around people who are in fear mode. So that's why people tend to have entity attachments that are in some sort of like synchronistic energy pattern of what they need, and then they keep you in it. And that's how people get hijacked into maintaining this fear mode or sadness or whatever, because they have entities around them that just happen to be in this environment that feed off of us people, like parasites. They're essentially parasitic. And then on top of that, there are also entities that have consciousness, like demonic entities and more powerful entities that some of these politicians and humans actually bow down and pray to, because I don't give them power, but they give them power, right? So they do sacrifices and they do certain things to appease those entities. So just like human form, the energetic form has layers of powers and capabilities as well. It's very complicated.
I believe the system's keeping us, and I know you know this, but keeps us on a lower frequency. And even like addiction, it's creating addiction, the system, the way it's all designed, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, the Rockefellers had their hands in Alcoholics Anonymous before even got the book was written. And they wrote, they created all areas in our system, the medical, the court. And I think it's designed perfectly to keep us in a lower frequency. Because if I bring up the word self-reliance in the 12-step group or trusting myself, that's kind of like, we're so conditioned to believe that's a no-no.
That's the programming. That is the conditioning. They don't want us to ever think for ourselves. They don't ever want us to believe that we have the capacity to heal ourselves, to do anything for ourselves. They want us to always rely outside of ourselves. So literally everything in our entire system, whether it's education, medical, political, whatever it may be, it's all designed that we need something outside of ourselves. And that's how you keep people in a loop. In my book, not in that book, but my book after that, I call it Courage to Change, the Freedom Movement. I talk about loops. And that's how they keep us suppressed, is they keep us in these loops or patterns. So it's all about repetition. So addiction is a loop. So
Uh-huh.
it doesn't even matter what you're addicted to. It could be porn, it could be food, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be physical abuse, it could be drama. It doesn't even matter what your addiction is. That is a loop. And they keep you in these loops over and over. So you just keep repeating the cycle and you never get out of it. It's like a hamster wheel that never gets off the wheel. No matter how tired you are, no matter how sick you are, no matter how hungry you are, you're just conditioned to stay, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And that's where a lot of people are. And that's where you get the term NPCs from a lot of times too, is because they're just like not even present. They're just like, they're in that loop and they've lost all their, like all life essence is gone. And there's just nobody there a lot of the times.
Yeah, I love that. I always say I was stuck in a thinking, feeling, drinking loop, and I didn't know how to get out of it. How would you describe the third dimension? And for those who may not have heard the term 3D interference, could you break that down for us briefly?
So dimensions are complicated, but also not complicated at the same time. Like think about dimensions as a physical space. So if you think about it simplistically, a building, and it has floors. So each floor is a dimensional field, and what are you capable of in each floor? So the third dimension is the floor that we are in, which is this reality. This is this version of Earth. There are other dimensions that are higher than this, like for example, fairies or Sasquatch. Yes, I do believe Sasquatch exists, and Bigfoot, and they're in fifth dimension. So in the same building, same energetic space, but just there's a barrier in between where we can't perceive each other. Well, really, the higher dimensions can perceive the lower dimensions. It's harder for the lower dimensions to perceive the higher dimensions. And that's why a lot of children can see the angelic realm, which are much higher in dimension. They might be 7th, 8th, 9th, 11th dimension, right? So dimensions have to do with our perception. What can we perceive in a physical sense? And then densities of consciousness is how evolved is our consciousness within this dimension. So for example, right now I am residing in a third dimension, just like you and everyone else watching this. But my density of consciousness, like what I can perceive, my knowing, my wisdom is so out of this. I don't even resonate with this dimension. I think differently. I act differently with pretty much everything I do. So I am resonating at a fifth density of consciousness or above. And that's what we're seeing a lot right now. It's also part of the Great Awakening. The density of consciousness of people is shifting. So they're in the 3D, but they are feeling like they don't belong anymore. They don't fit anymore. They don't like, they've broken the old patterns, and they're not doing they don't enjoy alcohol, for example, anymore. They don't want to go to the parties. They don't enjoy the superficial conversations. So their consciousness is evolving, but they're still in the 3D reality. So it's kind of like this awkward situation. 3D interference, what I mean by that, and what I call that in my book, 3D interference, is what are the ways that the dark players, my term, what are the ways that the dark players, what are the things that they do to keep us in the third dimension and our consciousness in the third dimension? How do they limit us? How do they put like a ceiling above us? So no matter what we do, we hit, we're hitting, we can't get out of these loops. I call that 3D interference. And that could be anything from, chemtrails, poisons in our food, programming. Literally, when I was a child, it didn't used to be called TV shows. It was programs. So the programming, the movies, all of the manipulation, the indoctrination in school, the vaccine, I don't know what words I'm allowed to say in your podcast here, but the vaccine injuries, and I go through in Starseeds and the Great Awakening all of the ways, not all of them, that I couldn't possibly do it in one book, but the main ways that they interfere with us to keep us suppressed. Sex magic, the pornography industry and hypersexualizing, that keeps us in our root chakra in a lower vibratory state, so that we actually have sexually transmitted demons, which is STDs, because we're transferring entities from one another. They do that through black box technology, is another 3D interference. So all of the black boxes, our phones, our computer screens, our televisions, anything with a black box, there's black box technology that is a portal system. So it's activated by what you do with it. So if you're watching porn or you're watching horror movies or, usually lower vibrational type of content, what happens is you are inadvertently opening portals into your home, and then entities are coming through. It's generated through AI technology. So I don't recommend people be mindful of what you're watching especially when you go to a movie theater and you're watching like a scary movie and there's like 100 people in there. There's entities flying all around, looshing off of people, and they're jumping, they're scared. Mirror portals. I mean, their voice of God technology is a satellite technology that emits frequencies that, if you match the frequency of that, people will hear and think suicidal thoughts or negative thoughts. I'm not good enough. I don't belong here. I'm a bad person. I'm ugly. I'm fat. I'm whatever negative thought you can think of. These frequencies hook you in to. So those are just a few examples so 3D interference is really just a widespread spectrum of the bombardment of technology and ways that they program and manipulate us.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Like, you hit it on the nail. Like, even like for me, you're talking about my own life. I understand what you're saying, because like I wear a Raider hat, right? But I don't know who plays for the Raiders. I don't watch it. So I'll be in public and somebody, hey, start talking to me about the Raiders, and I don't even know who plays for them. I don't even know what to say anymore. I've just like, it's kind of like that Christian saying, be in the world, but not of it. And you're still in the world, but you're really not of it. What drives the world is no longer driving me, and it's just like, I'm not into that kind of stuff anymore. And I think when you have an awakening, and I'm talking about my experience just on me, an unconscious person is easily changed by the world, easily affected by the world, but an awakened individual becomes a change for the world. It seems like you automatically want to be more helpful and more serviceful to humanity. Automatically, it just happens organically, and you could see things that some can't see, and it's through the eyes of compassion and seen through the heart. I don't know. It's changed my whole life. Everything about me, just different.
You're so right. That is so right. I mean, a 3D consciousness is ego driven. So when you're ego driven, you're service to self. So you are immature, spiritually immature, where you see somebody on another sports team and you hate them for it because they are on a different team or a different city or a different color skin or a different gender, whatever it may be. You're very competitive to a fault. You don't see the good in people. You get really triggered. You get triggered really easily. You hate people. You have this like hatred within you. You don't forgive. You are hyper charged. That's that ego. When you're in fifth dimensional and beyond density of consciousness, rather, you see all of that, but you don't let the ego take over. You're just aware, and you're neutral, and you're more conscious and mindful. So you're not triggered. You're like, oh yeah, I'm wearing this Raiders hat, but it doesn't define me. It is what it is. And you don't get triggered by political events right now, and you're not, you respond differently to pretty much everything. And like you said, you are the change. You be the change you want to see. I mean, that's a real thing. So when you're in fifth density consciousness and higher, you're of service to others. Then you start to look at people with compassion. You start to say, gosh, I used to be a really shitty person and I was mean to everybody. Now you look at a person in the store that seems like not a nice person, and instead of judging immediately, you say, I wonder what happened to that person. I bet you they've had a hard life. Like, I feel compassion for them. Or you see some homeless guy, and instead of judging and be like, oh, get a job, throwing trash at them, you're like, man, what happened? What went wrong? To me, I always think, gosh, what happened? Like, did he not or she not have parents? Like, where were their parents? Like, I just think about all the things, the scenarios that may have happened for them to be there. And you're just more open and more compassionate about the world around you. And that's the difference.
Even driving on the road and a little rodent crosses the road and you're like, whoa, you almost get in a car accident because you don't want to run it over.
Yeah.
Or just seeing everyone right now, just all the hate, the anger, the dehumanizing one another, the us against them mentality, and the pointing the fingers and the label consciousness everyone's stuck in, and easily triggered by their unresolved traumas. It's just really hard to see sometimes. I find myself crying more and more with tears of compassion, because I could see it clearly. Like I understand what's going on, but it's kind of sucks at the same time to see your loved ones or just people so separated with amongst one another.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges we are experiencing right now. When you're going through an awakening process, not everybody, you fall out of resonance with people in your life. It's just inevitable. It happens as you grow. Uh, not everybody grows with you. Some people grow separate, like apart. And I work with clients every day that unfortunately lost their family members or got kicked out of the family or can't see their grandchildren because they weren't vaccinated or because they are thinking a different way and the family doesn't like that. So division is huge right now, and it's really challenging to navigate who in your life is still in resonance and alignment with your highest good. And it's far and few between right now, and I think people are really struggling to navigate who is genuine anymore, who is in alignment with my growth, because people who are stuck in 3D do not like to see those other people in their life grow and evolve. They want to keep them where they are because that's where they're comfortable. And if they see someone doing better or evolving, then they're like, what do you think, you're better than me now? And again, that's 3D thinking. And that's then where they should be is, I'm so proud of you, maybe you can help me get there. But if they're not ready, you can't force it. So that's where
Yeah.
we are. There's like a mixed bag right now of people who are ready. Some are resentful of the ones that are doing well. Some are not, are resisting. And then there are those that are evolving, and there's clear division happening all over.
I would be in a 12-step meeting and, they go around the room saying I'm an alcoholic. I go, I ain't going to call myself that. I don't drink, and that's not healthy for my whole being. And you have a part in your book called Words Are Spells. And I'm not going to call myself that over and over. And I would love for you to touch on one of your favorite topics because I heard you share this. And it's one of my favorite topics that I love to learn from people like you. And I love looking at the research is epigenetics. Could you share a little bit about what
Yeah.
epigenetics is?
Yeah. The epigenetics is super complicated, and then you get into quantum
Yeah.
entanglement. But the most simple way to break it down, because I like to make things simple. That's my specialty.
Yeah.
I'm like, dumb it down, maybe not for you, but for me. I like to make it simple. So epigenetics, simply what it means is over generations of time, whether we realize it or not, we store our trauma in our body, and it could be multiple layers of trauma. Let's say my generational family is dealing with the women side are dealing with abandonment and enslavement and lack of self-worth and lack of trust and a lack of confidence. So that can be passed down generationally to the children and indefinitely. And it lives within the cells. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be activated right away. There could be a trigger moment where someone their daughter is, a teen and has a situation where they have a boy advances on them, and it's very traumatic, and then it triggers a cellular memory, and then all of a sudden it starts a cascade of events that isn't even rational for that person, and it could be trauma from the mom and the grandmother. So epigenetics is really about how the traumas collectively and generationally are stored within our DNA and passed down through generations. And it's not even physical illness. It's not limited to physical illness. It's emotions, it's traumas, it's limitations, it's fears, it's limiting belief systems. It's everything all together, and it's literally passed down in our genes. And the cool thing about starseeds is that starseeds are so unique, and the more advanced the starseeds are coming through, and I can explain what I mean by that in a minute, but the more advanced we are and we come through, the more light we're bringing in, the more we are altering the genetics and activating dormant DNA. And now we are the generations right now, like you're changing, me, I'm changing, and I have 3 children, and they're different than me. And the children that they bring in one day are going to be different. It's an evolution that we are evolving out of that. So the epigenetics is being reversed by the newer spiritual high frequency DNA is coming in and mixing with this human DNA. And now we are modifying in a good way by activating. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love learning from that, and even like believing the negative beliefs, right? Or the lower frequency type 3D belief systems that we get caught in, that affects our gene expression, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, we can either create disease or health with our mind and our beliefs and our perception.
And just like a good example is this. I hear this all the time, and it really bothers me. It's like, oh well, breast cancer runs in my family. Okay, well, if you're telling yourself breast cancer runs in your family your whole life, and you're gonna get, we can create, we can actually activate the gene.
Yeah.
And if you go to the you notice how we go to the doctors our whole life. What do they constantly ask us? Your family history. They want you to keep putting in the forefront of your consciousness all the illness that your parents had on both sides. Why do you care? Why do you need to keep bringing that up? It's like they want us to keep having it on the surface of our awareness so we actually can create that. So I say I refuse that. I'm not gonna. I'm not here to learn that lesson, and I refuse. Again, we are the generation and generations that are changing it all, and we are shifting the epigenetics, and we are transmuting and helping our ancestors, our ancestral line heal. It stops with us.
I totally agree. I was just telling my daughter this last week, because breast cancer runs in her mother's side of the family. But I go, you got to question the belief systems, the collective trauma, the habits. You got to start examining that stuff and move beyond that. Don't buy into that, because even like in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would be in a meeting and I'm not going to claim a disease. Why am I going to claim a disease?
Yeah, because that disease defines you. Then you
Yeah.
are an alcoholic. And the more you say it, your body believes it.
Thank you. I got shunned for that. I lost a lot of friends, but I'm okay with that and then, I don't try to correct people, but I just try to speak my own truth. And, so I just said, okay, it's done its job. I'm grateful for the experience and the help and the assistance to live on a spiritual basis. But now I got to move on because I'm just pissing people off and people. Yeah, so I had to walk away, but I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the experience and then the guidance that I had, but I had to move on.
Yes.
Yeah. I know someone that's a trauma therapist, but if you bring up ancestral trauma or generational trauma or even past life trauma, they kind of laugh. They say it's a cop out. It's an excuse for generational trauma. And I'm like, wow, and you're a trauma therapist? And they don't even know what epigenetics is. Could you share a little bit about your understanding on what ancestral trauma is, generational trauma, and past life trauma, and how that still can affect us to this present day?
Yeah, well, I'll start with saying that this is exactly my point in validating this indoctrination system that we find ourselves in. So these people, I can't even be mad at these doctors and therapists and things like that, because they're trained. And they are trained a certain way, and then they really truly believe it. So they're not taught. There are no classes in medical school about past life traumas and things like that. And really, people look at it more as a belief system than a science. And if there's no
Yeah.
science to back it up, then it doesn't exist. But that's the cool thing about the awakening. To keep going back to the Great Awakening, we're in a beautiful period of merging spirituality and science together. So that will be shifting. But they're not taught that, and maybe it goes against her internal beliefs. So they're going to say that does not exist, and then they're going to limit your healing capacity to this life with just the body and the mind. There's no soul. That's it. So it's just body and mind, and that's very limiting. But what happens, like I mentioned, with the ancestral healing of taking on the generational trauma of abandonment and all of these things, your soul also has had multiple lives. However many is determined by the person. But if you've had, let's say you've had many lifetimes where you drowned, then you come in this life and you have an irrational fear of drowning. And your parents are like, hey, you've never almost drowned. You weren't even in the pool that much. And you're like, well, how can I possibly have a fear of drowning? So those things are called bleed throughs, where the timelines are becoming very thin right now because of this evolution, where we're having bleed through memories and also fears of other lives where bad things have happened to us. And that's where these traumas can come in. So women
Mm.
who are very afraid of masculine figures and men might have a irrational fear of any man, any masculine energy. And they're working through traumas in other lifetimes where they were abused, they were abandoned. And it goes both ways for men too. So a lot of these things can be bleed throughs where we are recalling. But the beautiful thing about this timeline and the good thing about that is that we are volunteering. Anybody that's alive right now has volunteered to be in this ascension timeline, because this is an ascension timeline. And I believe everybody here right now chose to be here, whether they're here to heal their soul and that's it, or they're here to be of service to humanity, and or everything in between. There are variations to that and phases in our life where we're like, all right, I'm going to do soul healing this part, and then I'll be ready to help others. It's a mixed bag. But because there's such a mixed bag of potentials, there's a lot of different possibilities in the lessons that we're here to learn and how we're here to contribute. But the cool thing about this timeline is that it's almost like we chose a really difficult and challenging life for all of us that chose to be here, because not only are we really contributing to ancestral healing, but we're also transmuting traumas from our other lifetimes. And that's why those things are coming up, so that you can heal it in this life and work through it, so that you're helping to heal your soul, but also helping to heal the collective. So a lot's happening in this timeline all at the same time.
I love that. I remember being a little kid and I would like watch Indiana Jones, and then I remember that environment like I've been there before, or
Yeah.
those old Chinese kung fu movies that were translated in English. I knew that background, or even watching Star Wars or Star Trek. Like I know
Yeah.
that's familiar to me, and it's like. But then when I get caught up in my life and the trauma and the experiences, the gang life, the conditioning,
Mhm.
I like that all got flooded away for a while, and then till I had my awakening. But yeah, so I definitely believe in like reincarnation or living multiple lives all at one time. Um, just having different experiences, because I believe I had a little bit of remembrance of that stuff. And when I had my awakening, I went back to some of those teachings like India, learning about yoga, or, having swamis come and give me some guidance and stuff like that. So I don't think that was a coincidence. And you brought up Bigfoot. I came in loving Bigfoot already, and UFOs and ETs. I was just all into that stuff, but I wasn't into like the deeper spirituality part until I had my awakening. And I believe it all goes together, to be honest. Science without spirituality is incomplete, and spirituality without science is ignorance. It all goes together, in my opinion.
It does. It does. And we're seeing more of evidence of that now than previous generations. So I think it is working. It is coming out more and more in mainstream.
I told you, you got me teary eyed by the time I got to page 3 in your book, The Great Awakening. And one of the most powerful things you said for me, because it's hard for me to trust people, abandonment issues, um, going through what I went through myself. It's really hard to let someone in my inner circle. And I would love for you to walk into your life journey, if you don't mind, and touch on your upbringing and your journey in this lifetime, and to the present, and because I think you have a powerful story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yes, I would love to share. It's really hard to share so much information in a short period of time, so I'll try to make it brief. I was born in Los Angeles, California, in the 80s, to two teen parents. Um, I wouldn't say we were, pretty poor, but we got by. And my parents didn't stay together, but they were friends, and they kind of co-parented a little bit here and there. But it was really rough because I think my mom was trying to finish high school and ended up going to one of those high schools where for teen moms, so I went with her, and I spent a lot of time in daycare centers and things like that while she was working. So I was an only child. And around the age of 3-ish, can't remember exactly, one of my babysitters kidnapped me. And it was on the news. It was 3-4 days. Long story short, I do remember a lot of it, and I ended up being rescued. Doing some spiritual work on it now, looking back, I believe they were trying to traffic me, and I was saved, basically. Short story. I know my mom and dad weren't a part of it. It was an unfortunate situation with the babysitter. After that, but that was very traumatic for a young child. And then shortly after that, my mom was dating like a biker type of guy, much older than her, by probably 20 years older than her at least. Could have been her father. He started sexually molesting me at the age of 5, and it went on for probably at least 5 years. And the crazy thing is, she became friends with this guy, ended up getting married, and I had a stepdad, and we moved around. So I moved around a lot. Even when I was in California, I think I was in like 3 elementary schools before we even moved out of state. And so I was in Palos Verdes, I was in Torrance, Hawthorne, Redondo Beach, in different areas. And this guy would just seem to follow us around. It's like he was a friend of the family. And so no one knew he was just molesting me everywhere we went. He just followed us to a different house. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But I've healed a lot of those wounds at this point. And nobody knew. And I didn't tell a soul until I was in my 20s. And on top of all that, moving a lot. I was an only child, and we moved a significant amount of times. Different cities, different schools. And so I was always a new kid. And I was really skinny and like awkward looking. So I got made fun of a lot. I was bullied extensively. And it was really hard because I was hurt left and right. No one was nice to me. I was by myself. I didn't have any siblings, and the molestation was happening, and the kidnapping trauma, and like all of these things kind of compounded. So the saving grace for me was that we got a German Shepherd. My mom got a puppy for me, or for the family, when I was young. And I grew up with this dog, Chelsea. Everywhere I went, she was the only thing that was with me. And that developed my deep bond with the animal kingdom. And I received unconditional love that I had never felt anything in comparison to that up until that point. And it saved my life. It was what I needed. And I know now in hindsight that she came into my life to help me get through that period, which is why I'm so connected to animals. And so I really had a very challenging upbringing in that sense of like more emotional trauma, and a mom that was a teen mom. I mean, she was a child growing up, so I'm sure she made a lot of mistakes, and I don't resent her for it. But we had a lot of challenges back and forth. Because of all of that, I became kind of like this dark version of myself, and I was so angry. So by the time I went through like puberty and I was a teenager, first of all, I was like the biggest prude. I wouldn't let any boy touch me because I was so traumatized by sexual connection. But I was just like angry and bitter, and I was like, you try to fight me now, so now I'm trying to fight people because I'm like, I'm bigger now, I'm stronger now. And I just became this really destructive version of myself, still loving animals. That's all I cared about. But I started racing cars. But back when Fast and the Furious first came out, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be Michelle Rodriguez, and I'm going to, and I didn't care if I crashed or killed myself nor anyone else, which is the scary part. And I was very self-destructive, and not in a good place, mentally, physically, emotionally, nothing. And then my husband, now boyfriend, then came into my life right before I turned 21. And I swear he saved my life, because he just brought me out of my funk and was like, what the heck is your problem? Like, why are you so angry? And he helped me, and he opened me up, and I had a son, a couple years later with him, and then my son that was my awakening. I was like, okay, I could not be this destructive, horrible, angry, resentful, bitter person, hating the whole world, and be a mother. So I made a choice. I said, I'm gonna live in a world that's better for him. And then I started looking at other people like, okay, if I'm this way, other people must be the way they are because something happened to them. Maybe they had trauma. Maybe they were abused. Maybe this or that. And it was because of him that I opened up. My heart just cracked open. So I've had 3 children since him, and all of my children have opened me up in different ways. And also my spiritual gifts opened, and my intuitive gifts. And that led to a lot of other things. there's a lot more to the story involving animals and stuff. I just don't know what direction you want to go.
No, I think hopefully I can get you back when I buy your book and get you on talk about your new book on animals. I would love to get you on that and kind of really expand on that topic later, if possible.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking like, okay, you talk about 3D interference, but then you talked about how your husband and your son, your children, animals. Is there another term for that instead of 3D interference, or is there another side of the coin of 3D interference? Because
Oh
they,
gosh, I don't know. I've never
I think
actually thought
you
about.
should come up with that.
I
Come up
haven't
with
thought
one
about
for your
that.
writing. Because that's another form of 3D interference. Now they're helping you expand though.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of that. I never
Yeah.
really thought about it that way. I guess it's just like activating an awakening. They were my awakening
Yeah.
process. Each one of them helped me awaken a little bit more when I was ready for it to do the work that I'm doing today. Because if I go back and tap into like the 20-year-old version of me wearing all black, trying to fight people, racing cars, jumping out of airplanes, doing all of this stuff, and I said, look, this is what you're going to be doing, all these years, I would have been like, yeah, fuck off. Like, no way.
Yeah.
But look at me now, like, so anybody can change. It's just your perception and how you look at things. And
Mhm.
sometimes people need an event, and it doesn't always have to be a near death or a tragic event. Mine was a beautiful thing. I had a son, a child. I was a child myself. I wasn't ready, wasn't planned, but it shifted the trajectory of everything for me. So I think people just need that epiphany or some anchor point to shift their reality. It could be anything.
I love that. Or maybe you'll come up with a new word,
I know, right? Now
new
I'm gonna
term.
I'll be thinking about it now.
I identify with you a lot. I was very violent. I didn't care if someone wasn't moving anymore on the floor. I was just really caught up in the thug life, like Tupac, and and just real negative, full of anger, and it's like, man, I'm nowhere near that person anymore. I think there was some entity attachments that left me during my awakening because my friend Carlo, who passed away a couple years back, but he told me he heard me in a room fighting with like demons. That was what it sounded like, and so he didn't even bother me. That was the day I had my awakening. I had like a nirvana type experience where the candle was blown out, the candle of identity, and the light of identity, and then it turned back on like those magic candles, and I was a different person. But when I went through the 12 steps, I learned how to change my perspective, my perception on life. And I started to question things. And when I started to realize, like in the 4-step area, you hear about the near death experiencers having that life review. I started to have my own life review through the 12 steps. And I started to look at how things affected me, the fears I had, the traumas, the wrong perception, that unhealthy perception, the inner critic. When I started to become aware of that stuff, or even the secrets, I started to realize my mother and father had those as well, other human beings. That's why they have those emotional reactions, easily triggered and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And like, what happened to them? Just even questioning that, understanding is love's other name. And I started to have more compassion for humanity, and that woke me up completely. At least I can't say complete, but it just woke me up tremendously, where I just had more compassion in my heart, and
Yeah,
it just changed my whole point of view. Like Wayne Dyer, when he changed the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Everything changed. Yeah,
exactly. No, you're exactly right. And it happens in phases. Not everyone can wake up spontaneously all at once and everything. I mean, it
yeah,
certainly
you're right.
wasn't that way for me. It was like my first son and then my second son and then my daughter came, and it was like in phases. When I think when you're ready for it, the next phase occurs. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I still have a little bit of moments of awakenings. I had a couple of huge ones where things got blown away, and then I had little ones. And I think it's a continuous process for this experience, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
mean, we're always evolving. We're not going to get
Yeah.
it right now. I don't believe in perfection. I don't believe anyone's
Mm.
perfect. I think it's evolution, and evolution is ongoing. So no one ever knows everything, and we're not going to complete everything in this life. It's just not possible. And I don't even think that's the point.
What's your take on the Akashic records? Do you think that's like the mind of God or the source? Um,
I think it's literally the records of everything that's ever occurred in all of time and space, all dimensions. It's a record. It's just all the information. It's held. I don't think it has a time or space. It's not like in a book. It's energy. It's like a frequency, information. collective information stored within a frequency that I believe everybody has access to. I think there are certain guardian souls throughout the galaxies that have guardianship over it to make sure the authenticity remains, and like the wrong lower astral entities don't have access to it, because there's timeline wars. I mean, we can have 17 conversations and different podcasts on timeline wars and a lot of other things that are occurring right now. So we need guardians over them. But I believe that we all have access to those records for ourselves and for humanity. That's why I don't believe that we have to go outside of ourselves to get any information. I believe if we reach a higher enough density of consciousness, which we all have the capacity to do by tuning everything out, by grounding, by releasing traumas, limiting beliefs, and all of these things, getting in the right brain, and not thinking too much, we have access to whatever it is you want to know. It will come to you.
I know I've heard you mention that you're an ambassador for children. I'd love for you to touch on that. Sometimes when I see young couples, knowing my mistakes and my experiences as well, how fragile a little kid's mind is. I always tell, like, sometimes when I'll talk to a young couple, I'll say, just picture a little box that says fragile on their brain. Just be careful how you talk to them and
Yes.
and etc. I would love for you to touch on that a little bit about how conscious parenting.
Yeah, well, that's become my specialty. So I went from a registered veterinary technician, dedicating my life for over 20 years working with animals, and eventually evolved into working with people, adults, doing healings and kind of coaching, and it evolved into working with children. So, my big passion and specialty is working with children, and actually my daughter is the catalyst for that, because her soul came to me a year or so before she was even conceived or even thought of, and told me she would be coming into my life and that we would have a big life together and a big purpose. And she let me know she was coming. So a lot of this has to do with her, this work that I do with children. So I work with parents to help with conscious parenting, like breaking the generational programming of how we parent, how we look at children. And they're the souls that are coming through right now are so wise and so ascended, like they're the Starseeds that are the higher frequency that we haven't seen yet. So that's why they're so different. And unfortunately, they're labeled a lot of the times in negative ways, which I don't buy into labels. I go into that in all of my books, actually. And they're labeled with, hyperactivity, ADHD, autism. A lot of those are superpowers. Yes, some of it can be negative results of poisons and toxins from vaccines and things like that. Yes, certainly that's part of it. But a lot of the reasons they're unique and different is because they are advanced souls coming in to show us a different way, showing us how to act differently, to think outside of the box. They're more pure in their intention and their thought. They're already coming in service to others. They're more compassionate and loving and kind. And so the way we parent them, it has to be different. So they're our greatest teachers. So I coach on conscious parenting, and my biggest passion is education. So I'm working on creating new educational platforms, alternative conscious education. So I work with parents with highly psychic children, how to parent children like that, new earth children, and then education, bringing in this new earth education.
That's awesome. If you ever need a janitor at your school, just let me know.
You would,
I'm just messing around.
I would have you more than a janitor. Nothing wrong with janitors. Though. I mean, I respect janitors. I respect everybody, but yeah, of course, come on in.
I never went to school. I never paid attention. And I tried to go back recently, a couple years back, and I got into a couple of the professors at this community college. And they told me I had a learning disorder, and I remember thinking, like, maybe it's the way you teach. I even had one tell me off in front of the whole class, and it was a religion, real religion class, and it was over Shiva and why Shiva had a snake, and I kind of corrected him on accident and got pissed off. And
they don't like that.
Yeah.
Like that.
Anyways,
that's why we need this conscious education, because you're right. It is how they're being taught, because they're trying to mold children and teach them in an environment where they have to learn the exact same way and sit still for 6 hours a day, being lectured, memorized, take tests. We are actually not designed that way. We are much more imaginative and much more right-brained and less analytical. The primal aspect of us is logical because of survival, but we're actually way more creative. And they've taken all the creative aspects out of school and made all the content more left brain logical. So because that's how you control people, if you're thinking with your mind and memorizing, that's how they indoctrinate. So it's being done wrong, in my opinion. And so I'm looking to create education where it's more conscious led. So children can dictate how they're learning based on the learning style that they require, and the hours of the day that are best for them, and learning the content that is best suited for them in that moment. And so it's child directed and family directed. It's very different than any concept that we see today.
You're right. And, I remember thinking like, man, imagine if I was just a young kid, a little like 18 or 20-year-old, and he's telling me I have a learning disorder and I believed him. That's wrong. And I could see where they're trying to, make you believe the way they believe. Looking at,
Yeah.
They want you to be a part of their religious views and their political views. It became obvious to me. So I was like, wow, this is all indoctrination.
Yeah, well,
On
you know what?
purpose.
I wasn't very smart growing up, and I had a lot of trouble in school. And I had a teacher once, I remember as if it happened yesterday. She sat me down, and I was failing chemistry. No matter what she did, I did not understand it. And she looked at me and she said, "I think you have a learning disability." And she's like, "There's something wrong with you." And I
Wow.
cried for probably decades. I was affected by that, where I thought I was stupid. I really thought I was dumb. And this lady, it really hurt me the way she talked to me like that. And I believed her. So how many other kids are believing what they're being told because they
Yeah.
respect their teachers, and their teachers are supposed to know. And if they're saying you're stupid, you're going to believe it. And that is disheartening that occurs probably every day.
Yeah. Thank you. You touched on it right now a little while ago, but I want to ask you this question again because I think it's important to talk about. I know you have. I've heard you share on this, and I think it's pretty powerful. And I've talked to Susie Miller, talked to Mary Rodwell about this as well. But there's a rise in children coming in and being born on the spectrum, right? Um, and from the toxins, the food, the water, our environment. But do you think there's a spiritual reason they're coming in as well? Something deeper? Like, are they helping us raise humanity's vibration? Ushering us into the golden age? Are they? Because you write about high frequency children in your book as well. I'd love for you. Is there a deeper, another spiritual reason they're coming in?
Yeah, I mean that there is a huge, deeper spiritual reason, and I've kind of touched upon it in all the books that I've written because it's evolving and changing kind of as we navigate and learn more about it. Because I work with nonverbal, labeled autistic, hyperactive, dyslexic children all the time. And what I have discovered through my sessions is that these are evolved, ascended souls coming in here, not really part of 3D, but like, you're of it, but you're not really a part of it. And they're here because they think differently, they act differently. I had a child tell me the reason that they don't look in the eyes of other people, because they can see everything. They can see the demons. They see
Wow.
the intentions. They're overwhelmed because they see the aura. They see the entities attached. They see everything. And that's why a lot of children don't want to look in the eyes, because when you look in someone's eyes, you really do see the soul.
Yeah.
And some children get overwhelmed by that. So a lot of the things that we are claiming is wrong with these children that are labeled autistic that are actually unique qualities that are different, and they're more evolved coming in, and they are here to change the way we think about things, the way we look at things, the way we learn, the way we articulate. A lot of them are nonverbal because they don't want to speak our word spells, because they know that our words have spells and cast dark entities and all of this. And so they wait back and they observe, and they're trying to teach us uh, telepathy and heart to heart connection and energy, a new form, not a new, an ancient, actually, an ancient form of communication. So I'm going to use the word autism, but again, I don't believe in it. It's just a label, a 3D label to describe starseeds. That's what it is. So autism is actually is a superpower. These are gifts that these children have. but they look different to other children because comparing them to generations of children that have come before that are suppressed and indoctrinated through the epigenetics, right? Well, these children come in and they have different genetics because they have their spiritual DNA, the spiritual blueprints that they're coming through are different. So everything about them is different. Even some of these children have never been human before, so they're trying to figure out how to be in a human body. So they walk funny. They flap their arms. They stand on their tippy toes because they're trying to figure out these little meat suits and and the density. And I've had children literally tell me, from ages 4 to preteen, this reality doesn't look right. It smells funny. My body's too heavy. The food tastes funny here. The air is weird. Like, they know the difference. They can tell. They're hyper aware. They remember their past lives. They're like, this something's wrong with this world. This doesn't feel right. And so they're acutely and hyper aware and sensitive. And unfortunately, they're being called autistic and being medicated. And there's something we're being told, society's being told that there's something wrong with them and they need to be healed. But they are the next generation human. They are the future leaders. But right now they look odd to us in comparison to 3D, but they are where we are going to be in a world that operates a lot differently than we see right now.
Yeah, thank you. I even heard you talk about the way children are birthed is a problem. I'd love for you to touch on that if you can. The way they're being born, and maybe what's 5D pregnancy?
Those are two big questions. So
sorry.
I was a hypnobirthing practitioner for a lot of years ago. And what that is a childbirth, kind of like a childbirth education class, kind of like Lamaze, but not Lamaze, where it helps women have more mindful, conscious births. It's all about education, knowing your body, knowing how to trust your body, and the things that you do to prepare your body for childbirth. And nothing about the 3D is conducive for that, because we are taken to the doctor. We go to the doctor throughout our pregnancy, and we get our values checked and everything. And it's constantly based on charts and normal numbers. So basically everything is designed in our reality to put us in fear mode. All the movies we see of childbirth, women are screaming, crying. It's so painful. The doctors scare us because the heart rate's too this, or, the baby's too big, or, there's a lot of fear in the 3D with regard to pregnancy, and it didn't always used to be that way. So I feel like that's just part of the 3D interference of traumatizing and putting the mom in fear mode the whole pregnancy, so the baby also feels that and is born into that fear. And then the way that women go into birthing most of the time in the sympathetic mode, so they are in fight or flight because they're so terrified of going into labor because of all this horror stories, and they haven't relaxed their whole pregnancy because no one has taught them how. So they go in fear mode, and then they end up doing things that they don't need, and they trust the doctors and the system. And most of the things that they tell you to do in the hospital actually is counterintuitive. And so then their labors are stalled, and next thing you know that they have to have a cesarean. Everything is designed, and I talk about it more in depth in the book, to create a lower vibrational birth experience, not only for the mom, but a trauma for the child, down, especially even after they're born, to a cold, bright environment. Cord cutting is done way too fast. I mean, there's so many things done. That is, I believe it's part of the thing. They're trying to traumatize the babies so that we don't have a peaceful birth. So that's the kind of the 3D interference with regard to pregnancy and childbirth. There's more to it than that. 5D pregnancy is something completely different. 5D pregnancy is when women have symptoms of pregnancy, but they're not actually pregnant in this reality, but they're pregnant in a higher aspect or higher dimension of themselves, or maybe a future version of themselves in another timeline, where they're full on pregnant. Their belly is big, but there's no baby in there. So that's a completely different, kind of different topics.
Yeah, I seen that in there. I didn't get to touch on the 5D pregnancy, so I was like, "Whoa, wonder what that is." So I thought I
Yeah.
would ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You know what's interesting? I had Sophia Stewart on not too long ago, who wrote The Matrix, and she talks about how the Matrix is a stargate, a portal to bring the baby in to the world. It's the womb. So
Mhm.
they're interfering with the stargate,
Exactly.
basically.
Yeah, and
Wow.
I call it the birth portal in the book. So they want to interfere with the birth portal because when a soul comes through and is born, it goes through a portal system, and then it ends up, and the womb is the actual physical portal. So as the child goes through the birth, we don't like to use the word canal and hypnobirthing. We call it just the when the child is being born, and it goes through the physical birth, it's going through a birth portal. And the problem with that is, if they traumatize you enough or they bypass it altogether and they do cesarean, the child doesn't get to go through the birth portal. It's bypassed. I mean, they still go through it, but it's not the same. And that's another detriment and trauma that the child begins their life with. And they can get etherical viruses, which are energetic viruses from birth trauma. So I go into all of that in the book as well. It's really hard to explain quickly here, but the birth
Yeah.
portal, and there's a birth portal and there's a death portal. Both are equally important, which is why they traumatize the poor elderly and get them all, in riddled with disease. So by the time they leave and they go through the death portal, they're confused and they end up being reincarnated. And there's a whole other side to that as well. So coming in and leaving are two very important aspects of our reality. And it's like both points the dark players try to control so that they can control how you come in and how you leave.
And are there human beings aware of this as well?
What do you mean human?
That are working for the dark players? Or they're
I
like
don't, well, probably yes, but I think a lot of people don't know. Like, I honestly feel like most doctors have no idea because they're just medically
yeah,
trained
being
in a
used.
way. They're so indoctrinated that they just don't know anything else, and they are so comfortable with what they know that they'll fight for it, and they don't know what they don't know. So I think that's a majority of the time the case. But yes, I do. I'm sure there are some bad eggs out there that participate, and I know there's some in government programs that are in military bases, and they know exactly what they're doing and they know how they're doing it. And the people who design the education system and the classes and the textbooks certainly know what they're doing.
It's kind of like even in LA right now, what was going on over there. You know, they have psychologists, top of the line people that understand human behavior, that work for this dark side, right? And so they know how to poke the bear. You know, David Icke talks about, problem reaction solution. They know how to create the crisis. They know what's going to be the reaction, and they know how to bring in the solution. More surveillance, more of a police state,
Oh, yeah.
more control. And it's like this is all done on purpose. They know exactly what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. And but that's true for every aspect. Same with
Yeah,
disease. They
yeah.
create the disease and then they have the medication to fix it. They're like, oh, here you go. We got the medication to fix this disease, which they created the disease in the first place. That's the system.
Like David Icke would say, pandemic.
Yep. I've definitely used that term as well, for sure.
You have any last words for people that are struggling right now, full of fear, not knowing what's going to happen with all the chaos going on? What kind of words can you give someone?
So the the best advice that I have been giving, not only to the clients that I work with on a day-to-day basis, kind of like one-on-one work, and what I've kind of been saying in my own videos on my YouTube channel, and in podcasts is kind of the same thing. Um, the dark players have a really good system. They have AI involved. AI has infiltrated our reality to such an extent I don't think people realize, and that's a whole other topic. We're just being bombarded by 3D interference in every aspect, every way. So the best way to fight something you can't really control is to work on yourself, because the more that we go within and we ground and we stop paying attention to the drama and we forgive other people and we do the work and we tune the dark reality of the world out, and we stop taking sides, and we stop operating from a place of fear or anger or supercharge, and just try to bring yourself to as neutral point as possible. Because when you're neutral, you can look at everything from, I'm a big macro view type of person. So I always tell people, look at everything from a macro view. Look at your life from a macro view. If you're trying to make a decision in your life, look at it from a macro perspective. Look at all the elements as if you are trying to help someone else decide, and you have no emotional attachment to any answer that you give. And from a neutral perspective, you'll start to have more clarity and you'll follow your intuition more. So really, people should void out the noise and the distraction and not buy into it, not fight with each other, not compare yourself. Who is farther along in their spiritual journey than who someone else who's read more books? It doesn't matter. This is an individual journey. So focusing on yourself and doing what you can for your own self growth. The AI technology and all of these infiltrations, they won't work on you, because you've created a clear vessel and you've broken out of the loops. And that's what my books really try to help people navigate, the hows and the whys, and then the what to do. That's the purpose of my books is, okay, these are all the things happening. These are the things you can do. But that's the best way to navigate it. You can only control yourself and your reaction, and how you're because we are co-creators. So the way the dark players work is they instill fear and anger in our mind, and then we actually create. We don't realize that we create the right reality that they want through our anger and us like festering on it and focusing on it, because we are light, so we can create the dark narratives that they can't create. You cannot create from the dark. So they trick us into creating it by focusing our attention on it and almost like demanding it to be through our anger and fear. And so we stop that and combat that by cutting that out and not focusing our energy on the fear and the World War IIIs and the this and the that. And we just focus on, okay, what do we want the world to look like? And how can we, and how do I feel? And what can I do? And what would the world look like? And you focus your energy and time on that. And just take a break from AI. I told people, don't participate in meditations, activations, light language, or anything done through major platforms right now, like YouTubes and Rumbles and anything big, because there's AI interference going on and distorting. Disrupting. So how you're perceiving it on one end versus how the person is putting it out, they're able to mess it up somehow, and it can actually lower your frequency. So just be careful who you're trusting, who you're listening to, who you're surrounding yourself with, and just go and do the inner work. And that's the only thing we can control right now is what we do.
I appreciate that. I'm going to end it with some words from your book, The Great Awakening. Source, Divine Creator, Mother, Father, God, and Sophia are all frequencies of light in which are aspects of the universal consciousness. The name we choose to use doesn't change the meaning, only the interpretation. I believe the biggest test to our spiritual enlightenment is to remember who we are, and that even though we are fractals of the whole, we are all divine components of the quantum universe. Sherri, thanks for coming on and helping us create a broader lens.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been truly an honor to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you, and namastizzle.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.